This is Resonance. Hello everyone, my name is Jose Castillo and welcome to Resonance. Today I want to talk about what's going on in Cuba. There's social unrest and protesting that hasn't been seen in the island ever since the early 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed and brought down with it the economy of the island. Cuba is a place that I absolutely love. I visited it in 2017 and I have been enamored with Cuban culture, Cuban food, Cuban music, which has influenced my own musical taste and abilities. So yeah, it's a place that I hold dear in my heart. This is me and my girlfriend back in 2017 when we went there, and I will never forget the taxi driver that took us to the Plaza de la Revolucion, this place right here, and he told me, "I'm 80 years old. I have no fear of repercussion anymore. And I want to tell you that I fought in the revolution in the late 50s, but I did not fight for this misery that we're living in under." And that really hit me. It's impossible to go to Cuba and not see the discrepancies and the different level of inequality that people live in. But the inequality in Cuba is different because it's a communist state. So there's the communist governmental elite and the rest of people that live under surveillance and under a command economy where the government really controls industries. But right now, let me show you how things are looking over there. There's I'm going to show you a couple of videos of the protests. This first one is from Cuban people in front of the Capitolio, which, funnily enough, was designed to mimic the U.S. American Capitolio that was invaded earlier this January. They're chanting freedom, libertad. This is a different one. These are people aligned with the government chanting "Yo soy Fidel, I am Fidel." So echoing the former president, dictator Fidel Castro, the leader of the '59 revolution. So clearly you can see the two sides there. One side, the anti-state, the anti-Miguel Díaz-Canel, the current president of Cuba, who represents the Castro regime. People are tired. People are upset by the management of the pandemic of COVID-19 and just their lack of autonomy and economic freedom. They're protesting that, and this hasn't been seen, like I said, since the early 90s. And on the other side, you have people still aligned with the government, still aligned with the Castro, the communist ideology, and it's really not just black and white. And just because people are against the Cuban government, that doesn't mean that they're funded by the CIA or they're just fully aligned with the United States, or they are white Cubans from Miami funding these protests. You could see in the video there's Afro-Cubans there chanting and marching. They are sick. I've been reading on Twitter a bunch of voices of LGBTQ and the transsexual community in Cuba just calling out the American left, rejecting all action against the Cuban government because they don't live there, because they don't understand the inequality and the situation of living under an oppressive regime. Here's a statement by the President of the United States. on the protests. We stand with the Cuban people and their clarion call for freedom and relief from the tragic grip of the pandemic and from the decades of repression and economic suffering to which they have been subjected by Cuba's authoritarian regime. Clear call out to Miguel Diaz-Canel and the castrist way of governing. The Cuban people are bravely asserting fundamental and universal rights. Those rights, including the right of peaceful protest and the right to freely determine their own future, must be respected. The United States calls on the Cuban regime to hear their people and serve their needs at this vital moment rather than enriching themselves. It's known that the communist, the people aligned with the communist government have been corrupt. They are the ones managing the economy, hence they become the elite within a heavily controlled country. Here we have Senator Bernie Sanders. All people have the right to protest and to live in a democratic society. I call on the Cuban government to respect opposition rights and refrain from violence. It's also long past time to end the unilateral U.S. embargo on Cuba. This is important, key, because the U.S. government did not mention anything about the embargo, but the embargo has really affected the island of Cuba. It's not just the statist oppressive regime of Miguel Diaz-Canel and the castrist legacy. It's also the U.S. embargo, which has been in place for 60 years, in which Trump strengthened. It's also long past time to end the unilateral U.S. embargo on Cuba, which has only hurt, not helped, the Cuban people. Here we have Aida Chavez, a reporter from The Intercept. All of Trump's Cuba's policies are still in place. President Biden could lift all 240 of the sanctions Trump imposed to toughen a genocidal blockade at any moment with the swipe of a pen, but won't. Yeah, like I'm saying, Trump he strengthened these sanctions, he made it harder for actual Cubans to live in economic safety and economic they now live in economic distress, not only because of the government, but also because of the blockade, which prevents certain economic and social dynamics to take place. For example, I believe Western Union was banned, so the transfer of money, it's a dire situation. It's hard, and something that the U.S. government could do is start by lifting the embargo. Here we have Progressive International. The 60-year-old embargo, which has starved the Cuban people and deprived them of essential medical equipment amid a global pandemic, is inhumane, illegal, and highly unpopular. The time has come to end it. Here, Progressive International lists a survey by Data for Progress, which has 66% support for ending the 60-year-old embargo. 66% of Americans that are against the embargo. It's well understood that the embargo does not help the American people. If anything, it makes things worse, and that combined with an authoritarian regime that is governing in a backwards way that prevents any kind of autonomy is a recipe for disaster. And now the country gets hit with a global pandemic, and they've had enough. This is the reason why they're marching. And the President Miguel Diaz-Canel is asking for the people that support the government to fight against them, to protest against the counter-revolutionaries. And it's becoming, the social friction is becoming crazy. The president calls anyone that is against the government a worm, or or a rat that works for the imperialist Yankees, and that's just propaganda. In the same way, people that support the Cuban regime for any reason, maybe like they're really supportive of their medical corps, who help countries abroad. Anyone that supports that is considered a communist, castrist supporter. And no, things are not that black and white, and that's something that I want to emphasize here. Here we have another reporter from, I believe, Politico, Sabrina Rodriguez. As a Miami Cuban, I've got to say, I really wish more of the talk in D.C. about the situation in Cuba was about the Cuban people in Cuba and not in Miami. Miami's having its own thing. They're having a lot of airtime. As you know, a lot of people in Miami are Cuban. A lot of white Cubans that escaped the Castro regime. They're very anti-Castro. And they are taking a lot of the airplay in mainstream news. You can see even the mayor, Mayor Suarez, he's calling to intervene Cuba. He's calling to drop, to take drones there and drop bombs. I really don't understand this way of thinking. This is not the Cuban people talking. If we want to hear the Cuban people, that's why I showed those videos at the beginning. That's the real Cuban people speaking for themselves. They have their own autonomy. We don't need translators from the left or from the right to explain to us what's going on. Here's Zed Jelani, another reporter that I really like. The foreign policy version of wokeism is believing that the CIA or Israel or Western powers control all world events and that local actors have no sovereignty or agency. That's true. I fully believe that. When we start seeing everything through the lenses of what I said, like if you're anti Cuba government, you are by default a worm or just a neoliberal, Trump supporter. Who knows? Well, they say all kinds of things, and if you are pro some of the Cuban policies in the past, for example, their medical court, you are by default a communist or authoritarian lover. That line of thinking is just retrograde. It doesn't make sense at this point. We need to understand that this is Cuba. They are their own culture. They are their own people, and they need to voice out their own opinions. They deserve their own autonomy, and to give that autonomy back, the U.S. needs to stop their embargo, and the Cuban government needs to back out from the level of authoritarianism that it's involved with. It needs to help the people, like the taxi driver that told me his story, or the lady that when I visited took me to the government-owned shop so I could buy a lot of things and just leave a lot of US dollars there so they could have more money because they are limited to their own currency. When tourists go there, they can use US dollars, they can have US dollars, but not the actual people there. They have their own currency. So yeah, there's inequality there. It's just a different kind of inequality. And I just want to end this video just showing you, I just want to end this episode just showing you this video that really represents the two sides of the coin that I'm against, and how there's a big spectrum in between and outside of it. I talked about Peruvian economy, the Peruvian politics not that long ago, and the autocratic right-wing dictatorship of Alberto Fujimori, and we had his daughter running for president not long ago in Peru on a very neoliberal, very very right-wing agenda. But you can see here that doesn't mean anything in the end. Power breeds power, and you can be an autocrat no matter your ideology. So in this show we really try to promote thinking deeper about these issues and try to understand the point of view of the people and that are involved in these conflicts and these issues across the world, and to start considering new ways that the international community can help out. Like how can we, for example, in the United States, how can we help out? We can start mobilizing or start voting or start putting it out there that the embargo on Cuba is not necessarily the best of policies for the country. How about we start with uh, rejecting the provisions from the Trump administration and keep moving onwards. I think President Obama did a good job during his administration, working a lot with diplomacy. He did a lot of work in sports diplomacy. There's some fascinating projects like Cuba Skate, where Americans go to teach skateboarding to Cubans. I'm a big supporter of these programs. There can be more. There could be a lot of collaboration in music and food, and yeah, I think there's an opportunity for diplomacy to play an important role. So yeah, thank you very much, and I will talk to you later. Bye.